I woke up today and I had a brilliant idea. I thought I would share my political opinion. This is definitely not going to get me into any trouble whatsoever in the rest of my life. Where did I land last time I took this test? Well, opening this here, I landed a little bit around here. Left libertarian, not very far left, not very far libertarian. Some would call me a centrist. I guess that would disappoint people like J-Reg, Dreg, Junior Egg, Jurg. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I strongly agree with that, but I don't think economic globalization is inevitable. I think there's always going to be some push against it. I don't think everyone in the world is going to be included on it. It shouldn't have financial interests. It should have our human well-being interest in the first place. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. Nah, I disagree. I want my country to do well. But I feel like I've got so little impact over the choices that are being made, which are making the country a bit worse. So, whether it was right or wrong. No, I wouldn't support my country if it was wrong. So, yep, strongly disagree there. Quite simple. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I don't think it's entirely foolish, because you could be born into a really great country that does great things, but that seems to be happening less frequently in the world, so I'm going to put disagree there. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Fuck no. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Fuck no. Military action that defines international law is sometimes justified. I'm not familiar with international law. What I would expect is that it's running on basic principles like don't harm others, don't steal, don't kill others, that sort of stuff, right? And if military action is going against that, I disagree. There's a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I can agree with that. It's not all factual. It is, unfortunately, sensationalized. Things are quite extreme these days. They're meant to cause an emotional reaction. And I can't help but feel, and I use the word feel here, and when I read these statements, there's a sort of an emotional resonance that happens within me before I can try to put into words, which may seem more logical, why I feel that way. But again, it's still an emotional reaction. So I think it's all connected in information and entertainment. So I'm going to agree with that. People ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I would say that's more divided by class these days than it is by nationality, but yeah. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Now, I'm not an economist, so I have no idea if this is right or wrong. I don't know which one's the bigger issue. So I'm just going to click agree and see what happens. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. This is quite true, quite obvious. They require regulation. I agree with that. Now, if you're going to come here with ESG scores, I don't agree entirely with that, especially when considering that some of the highest scorers are oil producing companies, which doesn't make sense in my opinion. So yeah, they cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment. They require regulation. I agree. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Is that a Marxist quote? I'm not sure. Again, I'm not very I'm not very well informed when it comes to all of these different political things. I'm just doing this for fun, really. How do we define everyone's needs? Everyone's needs are different. So I like the statement as it sounds good, but I think in its implementation, I don't see it working. I don't know why, but I just don't see it working. Is it a good idea? I can agree with that. I can agree. I'm going to agree. I'm not going to say it's a fantastic idea, but I can say it's a good idea. The freer the market, the freer the people. So far in the world, that's observed to have been true. When looking at any countries that don't have free markets, the people are a lot less free, so I agree with that. It's a sad reflection on our society that sometimes as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I can agree with that. It'd be nice if water was free. Everything's got a price now, doesn't it? Everything's got a price. It is a sad reflection. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I agree, you shouldn't really put a price tag on it. I don't think that's quite fair, because it's just going to go into the hands of massive corporations or asset managers, and individuals are going to own a much larger percentage of land just based on the fact that they had more wealth initially. So that's going to definitely take the land out of the hands of the people, and that's going to be unfair. So it shouldn't be a commodity that's bought and sold, although I do think it should be fairly distributed. So if you and a group of people have, let's say you all have a very similar leaning when it comes to what sort of community you want to live in or that you want to raise your family in. And this can be individuals from all around the globe, some people from Japan, some people from India, yourself from your own country. You can all get together and say, hey, we all share these same values of how we want to organize community. How about we get this bit of land here and we try to make our own community? I think that's a good idea. It's based on the Network State by Balaji Sivarasan, so I can agree with that. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I agree, it is regrettable that many people make money just by manipulating the market or by manipulating other people's money and their funds and their assets. This has only increased recently, I think. And I agree, this is regrettable. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't a chance that the people, when they make their money, that they can then choose to do something charitable with it. But as far as I can tell, most people don't. And it is unfortunate and regrettable that that is how it's working in the world these days. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. What's protectionism? Government policies that restrict international trade to help domestic industries, or to improve economic activity within a domestic economy, but can also be implemented for safety or quality concerns. I can agree with that. I think countries who are self-sustaining when it comes to their own food production, that's an admirable thing. For example, in the Netherlands, not only do they make enough food for their own country, they export the extra food they make. That's a good thing. They've taken care of themselves first. I guess that's a degree of protectionism. Now they get to help the world. I'm thinking of that analogy, which is, you cannot fill other people's cup if your cup is not first full. I think there's a degree of truth to that. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. What? No. Only social responsibility is profits? Jeez. Oh, where's the humanity in this? It's like, that's unfortunately the world we live in. All we care about is the baseline financial profit, these numbers on the screen, the value of the bank accounts of those who are invested. The fact that that's the way the world works really disappoints me. Instead of considering at a baseline, let's try to help humanity as a whole. Let's do the good for all the people that we can. That's not the baseline. I disagree with that statement a lot. The rich are too highly taxed. I disagree with that. If anything, the rich know how to avoid taxes, so they're not taxed enough in that regard. They know how taxes work. They know how the laws work, so that they can avoid it. They can set up one company in one country, an investment company in another country, move the assets between those two. And the way that the laws are written in those countries is that it takes years for any sort of backtracking to be made, so that they can entirely avoid taxes altogether. So I think the statement the rich aren't taxed, it would be a statement that I agree with. They're not taxed. I agree with that. They're too highly taxed. I disagree with that. The way that international laws work is it's all set up in a way that keeps the money and the power in the hands of the few, which is really unfortunate. Rich are too highly taxed. I disagree. In fact, I would go beyond and say some of them are avoiding taxes. So they should probably crack down on that a little bit more. Those with the ability to pay should have access to a higher standard of medical care. Strongly disagree. What the hell, America? Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. But of course, governments won't do that because they're being paid by the businesses to not do that. So yeah, business pays government, government changes laws in according to help the businesses, and the cycle continues. If only we could rely on the government. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I can agree with that. I don't like the idea of monopolies, and I think if you want to inspire innovation, you're always going to need some sort of competition. Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Okay, now I disagree with that. It shouldn't always be illegal. Should it be illegal? I disagree with that also. I believe it should be the woman's choice, ultimately, whether she should have it or not. But I wouldn't just freely say have as many abortions as you want. What I would say is try to give an informed opinion about what sort of harm is done to the body when the abortion is done. Also, give certain information, like statistically, it seems that the reproduction rates in certain countries and for unfortunately certain races are really, really low. So before considering getting an abortion, you've got to consider, do you want to allow the child to go up for adoption? That's also an option which a lot of people, they don't want to consider. There are also a lot of people that do not take any of the preventative contraceptive methods, even though they're widely available and the information is out there. They still choose to have unprotected sex and then have multiple abortions. So it's a little bit icky in some territories for me, but ultimately I still think it's a woman's choice if she wants to. I just feel like they should be better informed about certain things, like the way the world's heading in terms of population numbers, the way that it affects the body, and all of that. All authority should be questioned. I agree, authority should be questioned. We should be able to question, hey, why are you in a power of authority? And they say, well, it's for your own good. And it's like, well, can you give evidence for that? And then a lot of times they can't really provide enough evidence, so why are you in authority? But in other times I think, why are you in authority? Because without me, I guess it would all go to chaos. It would all be anarchy. I can agree sometimes authority is necessary. We should still be able to question it. So I strongly agree. We should always be able to question authority. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, strongly disagree with that. That's going to hurt more people in the long run. To respond to hate with kindness instead, I think, is a better idea. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I think just because a theatre or museum isn't lucrative doesn't mean that it's not providing some value. Ultimately, like I said, the baseline shouldn't be some economic value or some bank account value or sets of zeros and ones on a computer. The baseline value should be, is it helping humanity? I think there's a lot of good culture that can come from theatres and museums. So we pay taxes, we don't know where the money's going. Well, I guess we do know that it's going up into the pockets of some richer people, some business and corporations, and some government officials and some politicians. We know that much. But if we knew and if we could choose for our tax money to go to support things that can help the general population as a whole, I think that's a good thing. It shouldn't be expected to, but it doesn't mean that I think that theatres or museums aren't a good thing. So I guess I'm going to slightly disagree with this one, but they shouldn't be expected to, which is why I agree with it. The way that the question is phrased is quite difficult to wrap my head around it. Not everything has to be commercially viable. If taxes were fair, then I would agree with this, but I don't feel like taxes are fair at the moment in the world. I guess ultimately I feel like theatres and museums represent culture, and I don't like the idea of losing culture. I like the idea of maintaining some culture and maintaining some connection to the past and to forms of entertainment like theatre. It gives actors a possibility for a job. So many people want to become actors, especially in the world that's become so overridden with entertainment. People want to work in that sort of area. If the way that taxes are distributed was fair, I can agree with this. But because it's not fair, I'm going to have to disagree. I know it's complicated, but I'm just going to leave it there. No, if it was fair, then I could click disagree. But because it's not fair in the world, I have to click agree at the moment. Yeah, if the way that taxes were distributed were fair, I would disagree. But because it's not fair, I'm going to have to agree. Schools should not make classrooms attendance compulsory. I agree, but that's only after the fact of a deliberation between the teachers, the parents, and the students on where the students' talents lie, and to be able to make sure that they get to benefit the most from their talents. If someone's really good at art but terrible at maths, stop giving them maths, give them more art. That's what I would say. All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. I'm not saying should. The word here that I disagree with is should. I disagree with that word here. I think people, if they choose to, can only surround themselves with their own kind. If that's what people want to do, sure. But it shouldn't be stated, it shouldn't be made into law. So all sorts of people have their rights. It's better that different sorts should keep to them. I disagree with that. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Now, I agree with that. Although a lot of people are going to find that controversial, I agree with it. I think it makes a lot of resilience in a person. Although it can go too far. That's the only problem I have with it. It can go too far, but Sometimes I think it's okay. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, they're their own individuals, really. They can keep some secrets. As long as they understand that the parent, hopefully, is always there to support them, will not judge them, and even if they may have disagreements on certain things, that's fine. That can be a healthy thing, as long as it's open to a healthy discussion and healthy disagreement. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I think it's okay for children to keep some secrets from their parent. And the way that the world's heading as well, I think we need more privacy. It's turning into a nanny state, authoritarian. Everything technological and digital is being monitored, and social credit scores are being implemented. And me just making this video has probably lowered my score substantially, because I may show, hey, I've got a bit of an anti-authoritarian bias. That's not going to be good if I ever live in a country which mandates and enforces authoritarian policies. So that's unfortunate. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offence. Strongly agree. It's not that dangerous. Depending on certain factors, of course. I don't think you should be doing it from a young age. I think you should give your brain a chance to fully develop before you do it. Smoking isn't healthy as well, so there's a lot of things to give consideration when it comes to marijuana, but just possessing it for personal use, not a criminal offence whatsoever. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generations to find jobs. Now, I'm a bit of a futurist, which means I think AI is going to come along and take away all our jobs. We're going to be seeing a lot more trucks transporting goods from one place to another just based on AI road technology. So we're going to lose trucking jobs. I think the same will happen with, for example, taxi drivers. We're not going to need someone to drive someone from one place to another. All you'll need is, if you're in your Google Calendar, you say, I've got to be at the museum for 6 o'clock. A car will appear outside your door saying the car's ready. You get in, no driver. It just takes you to the museum. I'm expecting that in the future as well. Jobs in factories as well. I think it's all going to become fully automated one day. I think there's going to be less and less fine-tuning with human hand. So I'm expecting there to be a lot less jobs in the future. So just considering that premise, that I'm expecting in the future for there to be a lot less jobs available, prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I disagree with it. I think there are going to be a lot less jobs available. Humans are going to be left for human creative endeavors, stuff that machines can't do. I think ultimately what a job implies is we got to keep the system running at a baseline financial level, instead of let's try to help humanity as much as possible, which I think is a better baseline. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. I would say, keep them informed what the life can be for the child. I believe there is a right for that life if you want to have that, but I don't like the idea of making things more difficult for future generations. I don't like that idea. It's a very tough question. So I'm going to allow people with serious inheritable disabilities, they should be allowed to reproduce, although I would say to do so with a degree of caution and to be well informed beforehand. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. The stoic part of me thinks that's a good idea, because if the child is disciplined, they'll be able to govern and operate themselves in society in a more productive and valuable manner. Is it the most important thing? It's not the most important thing, but it's still important. That's my only issue with this question, is the word most. I'd say the most important thing is to be a kind human being, to treat people with compassion and love. That to me is more important than discipline. Although discipline is high up there in the values that I would want my own children to have. So I'm going to have to disagree, just because I think it's not the most important, but it's still important. It's a very tricky question to answer. There are no savage and civilized people, there are only different cultures. I guess in the eyes of the, quote, savage people, it's not savage to them. So I guess I understand the premise that it is a different culture. I can agree with that. There are only different cultures, I can agree with that. It doesn't mean that in the eyes of a civilized person it won't appear savage, it's just a very different culture to their own. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Like I said, in the future there are going to be more and more jobs given to artificial intelligence and robots. And just because a person's able to do the same job a robot can, doesn't mean that the humans should do it. So for the way that the world's heading, I'm going to disagree with this one. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I disagree. We should be facing our problems head on, but I don't even practice what I'm preaching right now. That shows how difficult it is. I don't think the idea of distracting ourselves is going to fix the issue, so that's why I disagree. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. I disagree with that. I think they can be integrated within a new country. It depends if the country is set up in a way for them to feel welcome or not. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. I guess we've got to define what the most successful corporations are, because currently it's technological companies like Amazon and Google and Apple. I think the possibility to think, oh, I would like to buy this thing, and the fact that there's a website where you can most likely find it and get it delivered to your doorstep, I don't think that's a bad thing. I've heard that the premise upon which Jeff Bezos bases all his decisions is, does this support the customer? And every decision that has to be made at Amazon has to revolve around that. It's a monopoly. That's not good. But let's flip the statement. If we say what's good for us all is ultimately what's good for the most successful corporations, because then the most successful corporations will have to keep their focus on what's best for people. And the way that it seems right now, the most successful corporations are offering some sort of service or value to people, even though the profits, I think, are incredibly mismanaged and go into the hands of a few. I can disagree with that. But ultimately, if it wasn't offering a service or product that people wanted, they wouldn't have become successful companies in the first place. So I can understand that as a premise, what's good for people is ultimately going to determine what's going to make a corporation successful. So I have to agree with it, although it's very easy to point things in the argument that are very easy to disagree with. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Broadcasting institutions, as they stand in the world today, most of them are bought out by corporate interests who want to push a certain narrative. So I think there is always a private funding which causes the news to be biased, unfortunately. I think there are possibilities for public broadcasting channels. It doesn't mean still that there won't be private interests who are then sending funds to cause a bias, in the information that they spread. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counter-terrorism. I agree. I can strongly agree with that. Like, they called the peaceful protest in Canada a terrorist thing. It was the most peaceful protest that they've ever had in history, and they called it terrorism. So the civil liberties were being excessively curbed. I can strongly agree with that. The way the world's heading right now, you can't even do a peaceful protest. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. I wouldn't call it significant. It's definitely an advantage, but it's not significant, I would say, because who knows whether the one party is pushing in a direction that's progress. I have to kind of agree with it because, there's no back and forth of arguing what's best. They just decide this best. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. No, I disagree with that. Everyone should be worried about it. There's no privacy anymore. Of course, the argument that most people say is, oh, why are you scared? Are you one of those wrongdoers? Is that why you're scared? I believe ultimately people should have their own degree of privacy. The issue that I have here is with the only wrongdoers need to be worried, because even if you're not a wrongdoer, even if you're actually doing something that can help people, they can still somehow say through their surveillance that it's wrongdoing, even though it's not. So how they define what's wrongdoing, that's the issue that I have here, how they define a wrongdoing. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. You've got to make redemption a possibility, because if you don't make redemption a possibility, then it's all doomed from the get-go. There's no recovery, there's no chance of anything better. And then it's set in stone. So I think there's some possibility for redemption, which is why I don't think there should be a death penalty. Some people, sure, they can spend their whole lives in prison for different things that they do. You can definitely make some very, very, very strong points against the idea of giving someone the idea to redeem themselves. I can understand that, but I think that's just a fundamental human right that I want to put there. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed. and people below to be commanded. I have a hard time picturing one where there isn't people to obey and people to be commanded. I have a hard time picturing, because I've never seen it. I haven't got any examples for it. I guess if anyone's watching this video and has gone this far into the video, could you tell me of a civilized society where this isn't the case? Because if you can, sure, tell me it. I would like to learn about it, but I can't picture it. Abstract art doesn't represent anything. That doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Now, when it says here doesn't represent anything, does that mean to anyone? There's going to be at least one person out there who can say that the art represents at least one thing, right? So I don't agree with the statement that it doesn't represent anything. I can't agree with that. There's always going to be some interpretation to be had with the art. To you, it might not represent anything, if that's your own opinion, but it doesn't mean that to someone else it doesn't. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I disagree. I think rehabilitation is more important than punishment. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. I think we should still try. Even if it's a waste of time, I think we should still try. It can be a waste of time. In that regard, I can agree. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals, but I still think they should be given a chance. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. As it seems in the world today, that's true, but the world that we're heading into, I don't think it's going to be the case. And I'd say in the future, it's going to be more important for there to be writers and artists, and it's not all going to have to be about business and manufacturing. I wouldn't say one's more important than the other, I disagree. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Wow, that's a bit outdated, isn't it? My problem with this statement is first duty. To be a homemaker, just as a human being, not saying women or men in general, to be a homemaker is very, very important. Is it more important than a career to make your home? In that sense, I can sort of understand it. Some people are more career oriented, right? Some people are more homemaking oriented. It's not their first duty, so I disagree with that. Although homemaking and being a mother is a very beautiful thing, and it seems that we live in a world where that's almost shunned. The woman should choose to have a career and not to be a mother and not to be a homemaker. It seems that that message is being pushed these days. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. The way that the world is heading right now, I can agree. There are certainly people out there who are trying to push their idea of genetically modified plants into developing countries, and I can't agree with that. So it's true, they are being unethical about exploiting that at the moment in the world, and that makes me sad. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I disagree with the establishment. Does it show that I'm mature for making peace with it? Does that make a person mature? I disagree with what you're doing, but I accept it. That makes me mature. Or what about the opposite? I disagree with what you're doing, so I'm going to put my foot on the ground. Is that a mature decision? I think so. I think you can define maturity for both sides of the argument, weirdly enough. Whether you agree or disagree with the establishment, you can do so in a manner that's mature. But if you're making peace with something that you disagree with, is that something mature? I disagree in that case. And the way that the world is at the moment, I'm going to have to disagree at the moment. That's just how I feel at the moment. Doesn't mean I can't agree one day, but at the moment I disagree with the statement. Because I can sort of agree and sort of disagree. I'm kind of both. Astrology accurately explains many things. Is astrology the star signs? Because if we're saying that star signs explain many things, my instinct is to disagree with this. I appreciate the symbology, and a lot of the ideas that are presented in astrology can definitely make a lot of sense to a lot of people and be something fun and something to calm the mind and think, yes, it can all be explained by Mercury being in retrograde, of course. But not my cup of tea, I'm afraid. You cannot be moral without being religious. Now that's an interesting question. I was just thinking about this yesterday. Religion ultimately is trying to teach you what's good and what's bad morally. Where does the sense of good and bad come from if you don't believe in religion? Trying to see the statement a different way. Does it mean that atheists are amoral? I don't think so. I think atheists can still have a sense of morality, so I disagree with this. It seems that the world has gone through a phase where we used to base all our morals on religion, but then we separated religion from the morals, and now we're just using the morals and not the religion. That's where it came from. Had like a religious upbringing, our sense of morality. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. The unfortunate thing that goes through my head is that a lot of the charities that are set up in the world these days are just a way for rich people to avoid taxes. So that's got it leaves an ill taste in my mouth. But it doesn't mean that there aren't charities that have done genuinely good things for the disadvantaged. So again, I'm not well informed with all of these political terms, so I haven't got a concrete database of knowledge of what social security means and how it's benefited the poor. So I can't really answer this question in an informed manner. Charity makes it sound like it's down to the responsibility of only those who choose to be charitable, whereas social security sounds like it's saying to everyone, you have to be charitable. So one, I feel like tries to bake in the idea you've got to be good to the disadvantaged, and the other is you can choose to be good to the disadvantaged. Now, I think both are good, but in this case, maybe social security as a premise rings more pleasant to the ears. That's what it seems so far. So, better? I disagree. Some people are naturally unlucky. Ooh, unlucky. Just naturally being unlucky. Like, I can agree with that. I think there are some people out there who get struck by lightning 6 or 7 times. How unlucky do you have to be that person? It is important that my child's school instills religious values. The problem is the word instill, because it's saying here implant, like force, whereas I think the religious values should be open for a child to learn about. I think they can be taught it, not instilled it, but taught it. Hey, look, this religion says this, and this religion says that. Yeah, choose, what you agree with, I would say, instead of being forced down one idea. I guess the question is, would I prefer a place that instills it, which is a form of teaching, or a place that doesn't instill it, which means doesn't teach it whatsoever? I would lean towards teaching. I don't agree with instilling, but I think it's important to teach some of these values. So, another question that I can't really agree or disagree with, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards agree, weirdly enough. I don't agree with the idea of instilling it, so with that I disagree. But I think teaching religious values is probably more important than not teaching religious values. I don't know whether to agree or disagree with this one. If instead of religious it said spiritual values, I can kind of agree with that actually. So I'm going to put agree even though it's leaving a bad taste in my mouth, because I can quite easily write disagree here because of that whole instilling part. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I disagree. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I can agree with that. They can choose to adopt a child. I guess the question comes up, would it be more beneficial for a child to grow up with a mother and a father figure? Personally, I think so. Doesn't mean that a same-sex couple can't do a good job, or that they'll raise a child that isn't doing well in the world. I think they can do that. I think it's possible. But I think there are some things that you get from having a mother and father figure that you can't replace. I don't think you can replace it, but that's just my opinion. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Now, I've got my own gripes with this because I'm trying to avoid it, so if it wasn't available, that would make it much easier for me to avoid it. Of course, people are free to choose what they want to do, and I think we do live in a world that's overly lustful. I'm afraid that's the case, and that can have quite a degree of control over our more primal parts of our brain, our reptilian part of the brain, which just has it instantly available. So it should be legal, but on a personal level, I'm trying to avoid it. And if it was instantiated on a governmental level, I guess a lot less people would be addicted to these lustful things. I guess. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual? What? What sort of statement is that? If you somehow agree with this statement, it's going to know where you're going to line up on the political compass. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I agree. To a degree, I think that's a good thing. But I also have to agree with the statement that I think it has gone too far in many cases. Let's see where I stand. Boom. There I am. So where I used to be before was a little less left, a little less libertarian. Now I'm a bit more left, a bit more libertarian. I feel like the questions are framed in such a way that would make the left and libertarian seem reasonable. Maybe that's just the way that my brain works. I'd be very interested to talk with someone who's in a different quadrant and to get their reasoning for why they answer to different questions differently to me. I found this was an interesting exercise to do. I did expect to lean a bit more towards the libertarian side than I did the left side, which I guess a little bit I did. I wonder where that would land on if I was around there, which is basically in the middle. I'm around the middle here. So we've got around here democratic confederalism, Mandelaism, Nelson Mandela, I guess, environmentalism. Yeah, support the environment. Anti-authoritarianism. Not 100% anti-authority personally, but I'm not very happy with the way that authority is running in the world right now. Libertarian socialism. Don't know what that means. Gandhiism. I like Gandhi. I like the idea of the peaceful protest. What a fantastic idea. And right now we've got the lay flat movement. Just don't do anything. Like the government saying, you're forced to do all these things. And we're like, no, I'm just going to do nothing. What's the government going to do in that case? So responding by doing nothing, that would be interesting. But yeah, there you go. That was that. This is a long ass video. It's going to take forever to edit. Oh my god, I've been recording for 1 hour and 13 minutes. All right, let's go edit this. Bye.